Hi, this is Richard Pullen, the president of Teach Rare. This is my first video, and the goal will be to have a video at least once a week. And I want to take our content that we're making in a written form and to also give it a voice form. Through voice, we can do a little bit more explanation, and you can hear the tone, the emotions, and just go into a little bit more detail than I can usually do through content. Now, this is the first video, so I'm sure and I hope that in the future when I look back at this video, I say, oh my gosh, this is just so amateur. But I may not have the fancy graphics just yet. I may not have the audio in the background. That'll come. But key to this project is content. And the content has to be accessible, and the content has to be meaningful. So without further ado, let's get right to it. I wanted to start my first post just talking about how I'm now a columnist for an organization called BioNews. This is BioNews' website. You can learn a little bit through BioNews' website. It's a great portal to go to, but actually there's no content right here. What makes BioNews so amazing is their patient community or their network of websites. So we can see a little bit of what BioNews is doing on their main website. They've interviewed some of the people that have been around a while, and at the bottom you can see some links that go to the individual websites that they've dedicated to rare diseases. So each of these link to a website that is specifically about the rare disease. In there they'll have people who have a science background, a doctorate background, that can write very technical, very precise articles about the disease or about the treatments, therapies, and etc. However, they have a columnist section, which is the voice of the patient or the caregiver or someone that's directly affiliated with the person with rare disease, because often the person with rare disease may not be able to speak for themselves. Now, when I came across BioNews and the position opening to become a columnist, I was just blown away. Just reading their website, reading the people who make up this company. By far, they are the most inclusive company that I've ever worked for. And I would be willing to bet that they are the most inclusive company, if not one of the top 10 inclusive companies in the world. That's because inside of their columnist network, everybody has a rare disease or is directly connected, like myself. My daughter has a rare disease, so my daughter can't speak for herself like many of the people in the AADC deficiency community. So we have to speak for them. I was just absolutely blown away by their commitment to actually giving the patient voice. So that's just a little bit about BioNews. The goal wasn't do any PR for BioNews. I think they do enough on their own just by being exactly who they are. But I wanted to talk about what I'm doing with BioNews. And so I have this column that I write inside the AADC deficiency website. If you wanted to go to the URL, it is aadcnews.com. And then my featured post or my most recent column will be shown here. You can go to any of the columns on any of their networks under columns, and you can see we only have myself writing a column currently, but on some of the other rare diseases you would see multiple columns written by the people with that rare disease of that website. So I called mine The Journey of Beautiful Destinations, and that's because life to me is a journey. Along the way, we'll have ups and downs in our journey of life, but that doesn't exempt us from making memories. And my mom always taught me that we need to make memories. Along the way, we go to these beautiful destinations, and these are our memories. These are the times that we remember most in our life. And oftentimes, on this journey, the most meaningful destinations that we go to required a lot of work, determination, perseverance, and on down the list of things that we have to overcome obstacles and experience something difficult to get to that beautiful destination. And that's life. Inside of my column, I post once a week, and most of my columns have been dedicated to life before gene therapy, because that's our current population of AADC deficient children. Most of them haven't experienced gene therapy like my daughter. So it's important for me to continue to tap into that life before my daughter had gene therapy, which is getting harder each and every year. Now we're at the mark where she's been 2 years post-op, and she had the surgery just when she was before 2 years. So she's effectively post-gene therapy AADC deficient than pre-gene therapy. And that gives me a new perspective, but I also don't want to lose that perspective of what our parents, the majority of our parents, are still experiencing. So most of my posts have been about that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skip to my first post. Inside my first post, I give an introduction to myself and my family and our life together. One of the first lines that we have inside of writing a column to hook someone into reading, I really do pay a lot of attention to it, and it kind of sets the tone for the article. And I said, as a young boy, I used to lie in bed and play in my room imagining that I was a hero or that I had accomplished something great. And this is 100% true. I didn't make this up. This is true, and I still think back to that time when I was young, and usually it involved something with the military, and got to fight this hard battle, sweat. I got a bullet wound, and I'm still going up the mountain. And, in that dream, if you would call it that, in that vision, the goal was to overcome this great pain that I was feeling. And I said, I would be so proud if that was actually me in the future. Well, there was no great war for me. I didn't join the military like my parents did. And I didn't have any battles. I lived a pretty privileged life thanks to my parents and thanks to the choices that I made. I had love. I was surrounded by love. I had a support network growing up. I had parents that pushed me to be excellent. I was able to finish high school, finish my degrees, did my bachelor's, did my master's, was married, and my wife also had her master's, and we had secure jobs, and then we had our family. That makes life a lot easier. And I had no difficulties in my life up until my daughter being born and us finding out that she had this rare, debilitating disease. So life was pretty privileged for me, and I never had that war battle. But then came this realization that not everything was right, and that my daughter did have something wrong with her. Instantly, that thought back to a kid came into my mind that, okay, I may not be fighting a war. I may not be getting bullet holes in my shoulder and still fighting on. But here is my battle. And this battle is a psychological battle mainly, but there's a lot of physical battles. And, when I say that sleep deprivation, it's sleep deprivation, come on, just overcome that. It pays a toll on many parts of your health and how you interact and trying to reach your goals. And in this case, my goals for my daughter and my wife as well. So sleep deprivation just being one of the examples that I had talked about. Everything was planned. Everything was set in place. We were very stable. And then we had this great challenge. So I had no excuse but to, for lack of a better term, man up and take on this challenge without hesitation. So I kind of detail that inside of here. And one of the hardest things about this challenge and how it was completely different than what I thought a challenge may look like when I was a young boy was the pain and anguish that I saw happening with my daughter, or the pain and anguish that you see happening with your wife or your loved ones that are around it. And at the same time, trying to feel like I need to help everybody and willing to sacrifice anything that I could give. And I was 100% all for that. If I could make other people's lives better, and that meant I had to work, a little bit longer hours or whatever, I was willing to do that. Later, I found out that type of bravado is actually counterproductive because I need to be operating at 100%. So we have to delegate tasks. That's a more meaningful way of leadership. I talk more about that later on, but the biggest thing that came to me during this initial challenge that I realized that something was wrong with my daughter was just trying to calculate the chances. And I'll write about this inside of my book, but it still haunts me, and I gotta put it deep down inside my head. I don't know why it haunts me so much, but it does. I'll just read this short line. My wife and I didn't sleep or eat much at first either, and I would lie awake some nights wondering what the odds were of this happening. Judy and I met in Thailand, but I am from the US and she is from Taiwan. We didn't know it, but we were both autosomal recessive carriers for an ultra-rare disease. Even more strangely, Riley Ann had a 75% chance of not expressing AADC deficiency. Now, this numbers game is something that I've seen many times inside of our community, but also in the rare disease umbrella, because autosomal recessive carriers, you say it to anyone in the rare disease community, they're like, oh yeah, that's us. Oh yeah, we've had that same type of thinking where we're like, oh, the numbers, how did this happen? And their parents probably had the same thoughts that I'm having about my daughter. So once I got past this, that it was happening to me type of mentality, then I could kind of concentrate, okay, this is life. Life has challenges. We need to be proactive. And along the way of trying to help my daughter, trying to keep my daughter alive, we can still make memories. And you'll notice that I'll have a lot of pictures, and sometimes when I'm taking a picture of my daughter, and in this case she's not well, it's to remember that time, but then we're also making memories, and we have many photos from this hospital admission. We were making memories, we were playing games, we were happy. So we have a lot of photos, we have a lot of pictures that we can share that kind of show that we were still making memories along this difficult challenge. And then once we've got past it, in our case, once we've had gene therapy, the memories became a lot more increased. There was a lot less hardship and a lot more memories, where I want to bring all of our families inside of our AADC deficiency network, but also extend that to families inside the rare disease, undiagnosed disease, and even the special needs community. I would like to close this video by just reading the end of my post and then clicking the link to what I have linked here called Superheroes. My post ends by saying, I have never taken my privileged life for granted, but I also never realized how fragile it was. The more of these children I met, and the more I saw how determined their families were to care for them, I felt blessed to be there with them, to walk alongside them. I stopped trying to calculate the odds of this happening to me, and began to think of this as something that was destined. There was only one possibility, and this was it. What is up to me is how I choose to live this journey. I choose to meet this challenge head on. And 100%, obviously, I don't want this to have happened to my daughter. We can't change what is reality. But I have to say that the people, the families that I met along the way have just been inspirational. I never would have met these people if this hadn't happened. I would have just gone on living my privileged life of traveling around, posting all these happy photos online, and I'll get a little bit into that later. But just posting photos, not thinking of other people, just thinking of my family, how happy we are. And instead, I got to meet these families. So I'm just going to show you a link. And this, I didn't meet these children, but I met children just like this. So this CNN article is about a photographer, Josh Rossi, who photographed cancer patients, and these cancer patients are obviously children, and then digitally edited them to just show them as superheroes, because that's exactly who they are. I love this post. So it goes down and it shows the boy here and then his photoshopped photo afterwards. It really is. Inside of him, he is Batman and more. And when I met children just like this, and I'm sure Josh felt the same way when he met these children, they are superheroes and they inspire me. They go through a lot of hardship. They didn't have the privileged childhood that I had, and yet they are some of the happiest children. They are some of the hardest working people on earth, and they go through a lot of pain as well. And it was these encounters that I made with the families, with these children superheroes, that inspired me to write for BioNews, to try and do what I can, and Judy as well, what we can with the Teach Rare project. So this is our first video, and I hope that in the future when I look back at this video, I say the content was still great, and we've improved with how we did our video editing and how I talked during the video. So a lot to be done, but this is our first step, and that's our story. And thank you for tuning in to the very first Teach Rare video.